It's always amazing to see how these stories reach people from all corners of the world. This whole nightmare began on a rainy Thursday morning, just 2 days after I'd received the devastating call that my father had passed away. 2 days. I was at my apartment in Portland, surrounded by old photo albums, crying over pictures of fishing trips and baseball games from decades ago, when my phone buzzed with a text from my old high school friend, Marcus. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Hey man, so sorry about your dad. The service is Saturday. At Pinecrest, right? What time should I be there? I stared at the message, confusion cutting through my grief. What service? What was he talking about? My father had just passed away from a sudden heart attack after years of battling health issues. Yes, we'd had a complicated relationship, especially after my mother died. But surely my siblings wouldn't. They couldn't possibly. With trembling fingers, I called my older sister Diana. She'd always been the responsible one, the family organizer, the one who handled everything with cool, detached efficiency. "Hello, Jordan," she answered, her voice clipped and formal. No warmth, no shared grief, just the same dismissive tone she'd used with me for years. "Diana, Marcus. Just texted about Dad's funeral on Saturday. I haven't heard anything about arrangements being made." There was a pause, too long to be innocent, too calculated to be anything but deliberate. "We've taken care of everything," she finally said, each word carefully measured. "We didn't think you'd want to be involved, considering." "Considering? What?" My voice rose sharply. He was my father too. "Considering you haven't been part of this family for years," she replied, her voice hardening. "Michael and I decided it would be best to keep things small and dignified, just immediate family and close friends." The air in my lungs froze solid. Michael, my younger brother, the golden child, the perfect son who had never left home, who had taken over Dad's construction business while I'd gone off to pursue a career in architecture in another state. It had always been this way, them against me, the loyal children versus the one who abandoned the family. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my grief momentarily eclipsed by disbelief. "You're not going to tell me when and where my own father's funeral is? It's handled, Jordan," she said with finality. "Dad wouldn't have wanted a big scene, and frankly, neither do we. We're respecting his wishes." The lie was so blatant, it took my breath away. My father and I had reconnected. The last year of his life. Weekly phone calls that neither Michael nor Diana knew about. A private visit just 3 months ago where we'd finally talked through decades of misunderstandings. He'd even shown me his restored Mustang, the car he'd been working on for years, the one possession he truly cherished. "That's not true," I solid, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Dad and I had made peace. You know that's not what he would have wanted." "Always making it about you," Diana sighed, the familiar accusation that had been thrown at me since childhood. "This is exactly why we made this decision. Michael is devastated by Dad's passing, and I won't have you making his grief worse with your drama. Michael again, always Michael. The son who could do no wrong, whose feelings always came first." "You have no right," I started, but she cut me off. "Goodbye, Jordan. I'll send you some photos after the service if you'd like." Photos, like I was some distant acquaintance who couldn't make it to the event. The line went dead, and I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. The ache in my chest was physical, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. This wasn't just about a funeral. This was the final act in a lifetime of being pushed aside, minimized, excluded. It was the ultimate statement that I didn't belong, that I wasn't really part of the family, that my grief didn't matter. I slumped onto my couch, the photo albums scattered around me, now seeming like artifacts from someone else's life. Pictures of a family that didn't exist anymore, maybe. Never had. I picked up one from my high school graduation. My father stood proud, his arm around my shoulders, while Diana and Michael flanked us. On the surface, a perfect family portrait. But I remembered that day too well, how Diana had complained the entire morning about having to attend another one of Jordan's things. How Michael had been celebrated at breakfast for a baseball trophy, while my graduation was treated as an expected obligation. I flipped through more pages, years of memories tinged with the same pattern. My achievements acknowledged with distracted nods, while Michael's smallest accomplishments were celebrated like conquests. Diana's role as the perfect daughter, the organized one, the responsible one, always contrasted with my sensitivity and difficult nature. The familiar cold ache of being the family outsider settled over me, a ghost I'd never been able to exorcise, but this time something else flickered alongside it. A spark of anger, bright and hot, cutting through the fog of grief and hurt. They had gone too far this time. This wasn't about sibling rivalry or old family dynamics. This was cruel, vindictive, and a complete betrayal of who our father really was. The man I had finally reconnected with, the man who had spent our last year making amends. I reached for my phone again, but instead of calling Diana back, I called Marcus. "Hey, I'm so sorry about your dad," he answered immediately. "How are you holding up?" "Not great," I admitted. "Listen, what exactly did you hear about the funeral?" Michael posted in the hometown Facebook group. Saturday at 11 a.m. at Pinecrest. Chapel, then burial at Lakeview Cemetery. Reception after at your dad's house. Did I get something wrong? My breath caught. They had announced it publicly to the entire hometown, but deliberately kept me in the dark. The calculated cruelty of it stunned me. "No, you got it right." "Thanks, Marcus." "Will I see you there?" "Absolutely, man. Your dad was always good to me. Remember when he let us use his tools to build that ridiculous treehouse? The one that collapsed the first time we tried to sleep in it?" Despite everything, I smiled at the memory. "Yeah, he spent the whole next weekend showing us how to do it properly." After hanging up with Marcus, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. Saturday, just 2 days away. I could book a flight, show up, face the uncomfortable stares and whispers, force my siblings to acknowledge me in public, create exactly the scene Diana was so worried about. Or I could respect their wishes, stay away, grieve alone, and let them have their carefully choreographed farewell without the complication of my presence. Neither option felt right. Neither honored the relationship I had rebuilt with my father or the man he truly was. As darkness fell outside my apartment windows, I picked up one last photo. It was recent, from my visit 3 months ago. My father and I standing in his garage beside the gleaming red Mustang he'd spent 5 years restoring. His pride and joy. In the picture, he was smiling, really smiling. Not the stiff formal smile from obligatory family photos, but the genuine grin of a man sharing something he loved with someone he cared about. That's when it hit me. There was a third option. I picked up my phone one more time, but this time I called a different number. My father's lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, had contacted me briefly after Dad's death, mentioning there were matters to discuss, but respecting that the time wasn't right yet. "Mr. Williams, I'm sorry to call so late," I said when he answered. "Jordan, not at all. How are you holding up?" "I've been better." "Listen, I need to know something, and it might seem strange. Did my father leave any instructions about his car, the Mustang?" There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was going to discuss this with you after the funeral, but yes, the Mustang was specifically left to you, along with a letter. Your father was quite clear about it. A wave of emotion washed over me, too complex to name. Grief, vindication, love, loss all tangled together. "Does Diana know this?" I asked. "No one knows the specific contents of the will yet. I was planning to read it after the service, as is customary." A plan began to form in my mind. Not out of spite, not to create a scene, but to honor my father in the way I knew he would have wanted, to say goodbye on my own terms. "Mr. Abernathy, I need a favor, and it's going to sound unusual." The next morning I was on a flight to Ohio, back to the small town I'd left 12 years ago. As the plane descended through clouds, I looked down at the familiar patchwork of farms, suburbs, and the small downtown area where I'd spent my childhood. It looked smaller now, contained like a diorama of my past. By early afternoon, I was standing in Mr. Abernathy's office, listening as he explained the details of my father's will, including the letter that was specifically for me. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. "Jordan," it began in my father's familiar, slightly messy handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and we've run out of time to say everything that needed saying. But I want you to know that this past year of reconnecting with you has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. I was wrong about so many things, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I drove past slowly, not stopping, just observing. From a distance, I could see Diana's tall, thin figure directing people, micromanaging even in grief. Michael stood nearby, accepting condolences, playing the role of the devastated son to perfection. I didn't stop. This part of the service wasn't for me. Instead, I drove directly to Lakeview Cemetery, about 2 miles away. I knew from Marcus that the burial would follow immediately after the chapel service. The cemetery was peaceful, rows of headstones stretching across manicured grass, ancient oak trees providing patches of dappled shade. I parked the Mustang near the entrance and walked to the freshly dug grave that would soon hold my father. It was marked with a temporary plaque, "Robert James Calloway, beloved father and friend." Nothing about being a husband. My mother had been gone for 15 years, and he'd never remarried. Nothing about his career or accomplishments. Just father and friend. It seemed fitting somehow. I stood there alone, the letter I'd written clutched in my hand, and began to speak softly, as if he could hear me. "Dad, I'm here. Despite everything, I'm here to say goodbye. I got your letter, and the car. Thank you for both. I wish we'd had more time, but I'm grateful for the time we did have." Tears threatened, but I pushed on. "I forgive you for the past, for the misunderstandings and the distance. And I hope you can forgive me too, for staying away so long, for not trying harder to bridge the gap sooner." I unfolded my letter and read it aloud, my voice carrying only as far as the nearest trees. Words of love, of regret, of gratitude. Words that needed saying, even if only the wind and the grass could hear them. When I finished, I carefully folded the letter and placed it on the ground where the casket would soon rest. A private message. That would be buried with him, our final correspondence. Then I walked back to the Mustang and waited. It wasn't long before I heard the procession of cars approaching. I started the engine but didn't move, just sat there as the funeral cortege filed into the cemetery. The hearse came first, followed by a sleek black car that I assumed held Diana and Michael, then a line of other vehicles filled with mourners. I watched as cemetery workers respectfully unloaded my father's casket-polished oak with brass fittings, exactly his style. Diana and Michael emerged from their car, both dressed impeccably in black, both wearing expressions of composed grief that seemed practiced, almost theatrical. They didn't notice the Mustang at first, or if they did, they didn't recognize its significance. They were too focused on the ceremony, on playing their roles perfectly. I waited until everyone had gathered around the grave, until the minister began speaking words of comfort and hope. Then, with deliberate calm, I drove the Mustang slowly along the cemetery path, the engine's deep rumble an unmistakable announcement. Of my arrival, the reaction was immediate. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The minister faltered in his reading. I parked a respectful distance away and got out of the car. In the sudden silence, the sound of the car door closing seemed unnaturally loud. I didn't rush. I didn't skulk. I walked with measured steps toward my father's casket, my head held high, my focus entirely on saying a proper goodbye to the man who had given me life. Diana saw me first. Her face went from shock to fury in an instant. Michael looked confused, then alarmed, already moving as if to intercept me. But something, perhaps the dignity of the occasion, perhaps the public setting, kept them from creating the very scene they had tried to avoid by excluding me. I reached the edge of the gathering and stood there, not pushing forward, not demanding. Space, simply present. A son come to bury his father. The minister, a kind-faced older man I didn't recognize, recovered quickly. "Let us continue," he said, but his eyes lingered on me with a question. I gave a small nod, and he resumed the service. I stood there, an outsider at the edges, listening as he spoke of my father's life, his contributions to the community, his coke, an outsider at the edges, listening as he spoke of my father's life, love for his family. When it came time for personal reflections, Diana spoke first, her voice steady and clear as she recalled our father's strength and integrity. Michael followed with an emotional tribute to the best dad anyone could ask for. No one invited me to speak. No one acknowledged my presence. I was a ghost at my own father's funeral, visible but unseen. Minutes ticked by with no response. I was about to give up when my phone rang. Michael's number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Did you know?" Michael's voice was tight, strained, nothing like his usual confident tone. "Know what, Michael? I'm tired, and it's late. Just say what you want to say." He exhaled sharply. "Did you know Dad changed his will last year?" "After your visit?" I hadn't known. "No," I admitted. "He left me the Mustang, that's all I knew." "He left you half the house," Michael said, his voice flat, "and his tools. And a third of his savings. Equal shares with Diana and me." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. My father had changed his will to include me as an equal heir, a public declaration of reconciliation, of family belonging that neither Michael nor Diana could deny or hide. "I didn't know," I repeated finally. "Diana's furious," Michael continued, an edge of something, fear, uncertainty, in his voice. "She's talking about contesting the will, saying he wasn't of sound mind." "He was perfectly sound," I said. Anger flaring. "You know that." "I know." The admission surprised me. That's partly why I'm calling. Mr. Abernathy mentioned your weekly calls with Dad, said you two had become close again." I waited, sensing there was more. "Why didn't you tell us?" Michael asked, and for the first time in our adult lives I heard genuine hurt in his voice, not just entitlement or anger. "Would you have believed me?" I countered. "Or would you and Diana have found a way to interfere, like you did with the funeral?" His silence was answer enough. "Look, Michael," I said, softening my tone. "I didn't reconnect with Dad for his money or his house. I just wanted my father back before it was too late. The fact that he changed his will, that was his decision, not mine. But why would he do that?" Michael asked, and I realized with a shock that he genuinely couldn't comprehend it. In his mind, he and Diana had been the loyal, devoted children. I had been the deserter, the disappointment. The idea that our father might see things differently had never occurred to him. "Maybe you should read his letter to me," I suggested. "It might help you understand." "He left you a letter?" "Yes, with Mr. Abernathy." Another long silence. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, "He left me one too. I haven't opened it yet." The vulnerability in that admission caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw my brother not as the favored golden child or the antagonist in my family story, but as someone also grappling with loss and confusion. "Read it, Michael," I said gently. Dad had things he wanted to say to each of us. Things he maybe couldn't say while he was alive. "Yeah," he murmured. "Maybe I will." A pause then. "So what happens now, with the house and everything?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I need to think. It's a lot to process." "Yeah." Another pause. "Well, I should let you get some sleep. Drive safe tomorrow." The call ended, leaving me wide awake, my mind racing. I got up and went to the window, pulling back the cheap curtain to look out at the Mustang, a silhouette of perfect lines and curves in the dim parking lot light. My father had left me more than a car. He had left me a place in the family, a claim to our shared history and home, a statement that couldn't be ignored or denied. And in doing so, he had forced a conversation that might otherwise never have happened. I slept fitfully, dreams of my father and childhood home mingling with images of Diana's angry face and Michael's confused one. When dawn broke, I was all ready. On the road, the Mustang eating up miles as I pushed westward, trying to outrun the complications my father's will had created. By late afternoon, I had crossed into Illinois, the flat farmland stretching to the horizon under a vast blue sky. My phone had remained silent all day. No more texts from Michael. No calls from Diana or Mr. Abernathy. The silence felt like the calm before a storm, a temporary reprieve before the real battle began. I pulled off at a rest stop, stretching my legs and checking my phone for emails. There was one from Mr. Abernathy, formal and direct. "Mr. Calloway, I regret that the reading of your father's will was moved forward without proper notification to all parties. I have attached the relevant documents for your review, along with information about your inheritance. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss next steps." I opened the attachment, scanning through the legal language, until I found the key passages. It was exactly as Michael had said. The house to be shared equally between Michael and me. Diana already owned her own home. His tools and workshop equipment to me. His personal effects to be divided equally among all 3 children, and his financial assets split 3 ways. At the end was a personal note from my father to all of us, a part of the will itself. To my 3 children. Material possessions are just things, and money is just paper. What matters is family. I hope that in sharing my legacy equally among you, I can help heal the divisions that have kept you apart. Even considered it possible. Yet here we were, cautiously opening lines of communication that had been closed for years, all because of my father's final, carefully orchestrated intervention. As the landscape changed around me, mountains rising. In the distance, I thought about the power of last wishes, of final gestures. My father had used his death, the one event he knew would bring all his children together, however reluctantly, to create an opportunity for healing. He couldn't force us to take it, but he could make sure the door was open. By the time I crossed into Oregon, the familiar Pacific Northwest landscape welcoming me home, I had made a decision. I would honor my father's wish. I would try to rebuild some kind of relationship with my siblings. Not for the sake of the inheritance, not even primarily for my own peace of mind, but because it was what he had wanted most at the end. It wouldn't be easy. There were years of hurt and misunderstanding to overcome, patterns of interaction that would be difficult to change. But if my father could spend 5 years painstakingly restoring a rusted-out shell of a car to gleaming perfection, surely we could invest some time in restoring our family connections. As I finally pulled into my own driveway in Portland, exhausted but somehow lighter than when I'd left, my neighbor Walter came out to admire the Mustang. "Where'd you get this beauty?" he asked, running an appreciative hand along the fender. "It was my father's," I said, the words coming easily now without the sharp edge of grief. "He left it to me. He had excellent taste," Walter said. "They don't make them like this anymore." "No," I agreed, looking at the car with new eyes. "They really don't." Inside my apartment, I unpacked my small bag, checked my mail, and tried to settle back into normal life. But everything felt different now. I had left Portland as a man cut off from his family, heading to a funeral he wasn't welcome to attend. I had returned as someone with a sister and brother who were, however tentatively, willing to try rebuilding what had been broken. And I had returned with a tangible connection to my father, not just the car, but the letters, the changed will, the evidence that in his final months, he had seen me clearly and loved what he saw. That night, I called Marcus to update him on everything that had happened since I'd left the cemetery. "So what now?" he asked after I'd filled him in. "Are you going to sell your half of the house, move back? What's the plan?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I need to talk to Michael and Diana, figure out what makes sense for all of us." "That's surprisingly mature," Marcus said, a smile in his voice. The Jordan I knew in high school would have been plotting sweet revenge against his evil siblings. I laughed. "Well, the Jordan you knew in high school was kind of an idiot sometimes." "True," he agreed cheerfully. "But seriously, I'm proud of you, man. Your dad would be too." After we hung up, I went out to the street where I'd parked the Mustang. The city noises faded as I slid into the driver's seat, running my hands over the wheel, feeling the smooth leather, the polished wood of the dashboard, the solid metal of the gear shift. In this car, I felt connected to my father in a way that transcended death, connected to his patience, his craftsmanship, his ability to see the potential in something damaged and discarded. It was the best of him, preserved and passed on to me. "Thanks, Dad," I said softly to the empty car. "For the second chance, for believing it wasn't too late. I'll try to do the same." As if in response, the last rays of the setting sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the car's interior with a warm golden glow. A coincidence, of course, just a quirk of weather and timing. But sitting there in my father's lovingly restored Mustang, surrounded by the tangible results of his dedication and care, it felt like more than that. It felt like a blessing, a benediction, a final, wordless reassurance that some things, once broken, can indeed be made whole again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. You were always different from your siblings, more creative, more independent, more willing to challenge the way things were. I mistook that for rebellion when I should have recognized it as strength. You had the courage to forge your own path, even when it was lonely. I'm leaving you the Mustang because you're the only one who ever really understood why it mattered to me. It wasn't just about having a classic car. It was about taking something broken and bringing it back to life, about seeing the potential in something others had given up on. Like you did with our relationship. Drive it and remember that it's never too late to rebuild something valuable, even after years of neglect. I'm proud of the man you've become, Jordan. I should have told you that more often. Love, Dad. Tears blurred my vision, dropping onto the paper and smudging the ink. I carefully folded the letter and put it in my pocket, close to my heart. "There's something else," Mr. Abernathy said gently. "Your father left a set of keys for you." He handed me a small box. Inside were the keys to the Mustang, along with a small handwritten note. "It's in the garage, fully restored. Full tank of gas. Take good care of her." Mr. Abernathy coughed discreetly. "I should mention that technically, the transfer of property doesn't happen until after the will is officially read following the funeral. But your father was very specific that you should have access to the vehicle immediately upon his passing." I looked up, meeting his eyes, and saw understanding there. "Thank you," I said simply. "Your father was a good man," he replied. "Stubborn and set in his ways, but fair. He regretted many things toward the end." He hesitated, then added, "I've known your family for a long time, Jordan. I'm sorry about the funeral situation. It's not right." So he knew. Of course he did. In a small town like this, Everyone knew everything. "It is what it is," I said, pocketing the keys. "But I'm not going to let them erase me from his life. Not anymore." As I walked out of his office into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a strange sense of calm determination. I wasn't going to create a scene at my father's funeral. I wasn't going to force my way in where I wasn't wanted. But I was going to say goodbye to my father on my own terms, in my own way. And in doing so, I would finally take my place as his son, whether my siblings approved or not. I drove a rental car to my father's house, my childhood home, a modest two-story colonial on Maple Street. The driveway was empty. Diana and Michael were probably busy with funeral arrangements. Good. This would be easier without a confrontation. I used my old key, the one I'd kept all these years even though I rarely visited. The house smelled the same, a mixture of coffee, old books, and that indefinable scent that simply meant home. I stood in the entry for a moment, overwhelmed by memories, my mother's laugh echoing from the kitchen, my father's heavy footsteps on the stairs, the sounds of a family that once was, but I hadn't come for a nostalgia tour. I made my way through the house to the back door, which led to the detached garage. My father's sanctuary, the place where he'd spent countless hours tinkering with engines and building things with his hands. I unlocked the side door and stepped inside. There she was, gleaming under the skylight, the 1967 Mustang GT Fastback, candy apple red with pristine chrome detailing. My father had bought it as a rusted shell when I was in high school, promising to restore it to its former glory. It had taken him years, a labor of love that had outlasted his marriage, his career, and nearly his life. I ran my hand along the smooth hood, remembering the last time I'd seen it. My father had started the engine, the powerful rumble filling the garage, and said, "One day, this beauty will be yours." I hadn't taken him seriously then. Just another of Dad's offhand comments, I'd thought. But he'd meant it. All along, he'd been restoring this car for me. I inserted the key into the ignition, and the engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones. It felt like my father's voice, saying one last hello. I backed the Mustang out of the garage carefully then, parked it in the street. I returned the rental car to the local agency, then went to check into the small hotel downtown. I had one day to prepare, one day to gather my courage for what would come next. That evening, I walked through the town, reacquainting myself with streets and shops that had once been as familiar as my own reflection. The hardware store where my dad had bought his tools. The ice cream parlor where we'd celebrated Little League wins and good report cards. The park where I'd had my first kiss. It was strange how a place could feel both completely familiar and utterly foreign at the same time. Like looking at your childhood home through the windows rather than from inside. I ran into a few people who recognized me, my third-grade teacher, now retired, the owner of the local diner, a couple of old classmates who'd never left town. Each encounter followed the same pattern: initial surprise, awkward condolences, then the careful avoidance of mentioning the funeral. News traveled fast in small towns. Everyone knew I wasn't supposed to be there. As I walked back to my hotel in the gathering dusk, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Just heard you're in town. Want to grab a drink?" An hour later, we were sitting in the Rusty Nail, the same dive bar where we'd used fake IDs to buy beer at 19. Marcus looked older, a receding hairline, laugh lines around his eyes, but his smile was the same. "So," he said after we'd caught up on careers and families, he had 2 kids now, a fact that stunned me. "What's the plan for tomorrow? Diana's going to have a coronary when she sees you." I took a long sip of my beer. "That's not my intention. I'm not there to upset anyone. But you are going?" "Despite," he trailed off, not wanting to state the obvious, that I hadn't been invited. "Yes," I said firmly. "But not how they're expecting." I told him about the Mustang, about my father's letter, about my plan. As I spoke, his eyes widened, then crinkled with approval. "That's perfect," he said when I finished. "Absolutely perfect. Your dad would have loved it." "You think?" I needed the reassurance, the confirmation that I wasn't just acting out of hurt and spite. "I know it," Marcus said, clinking his bottle against mine. "Your dad was always more like you than either of your siblings, you know. He just didn't know how to show it." We talked for hours, not just about my father or the funeral, but about life, about the diverging paths we'd taken, about growing up and growing apart, and sometimes finding your way back. By the time we said goodbye outside the bar, I felt steadier, more certain of my course. Back in my hotel room, I laid out the suit I'd brought for the funeral, dark gray, my father's favorite color. Then I sat by the window, looking out at the town lights, and allowed myself to really feel the grief I'd been holding at bay. My father was gone. The man who'd taught me to throw a baseball, who'd checked under my bed for monsters, who'd helped me move into my first apartment. The man who'd disappointed me, misunderstood me, and finally, in his last year, had reached out to bridge the gulf between us. The complex, flawed, loving, stubborn man who had shaped so much of who I was, even in my determination to be different from him. I cried then, truly cried, alone in that hotel room with only the moon as witness. I cried for all the years we'd lost, for the relationship we'd only just begun to rebuild, for the grandchildren he'd never meet, for the conversations we'd never have. And as the tears finally slowed, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. Tomorrow would be hard, possibly one of the hardest days of my life, but I was ready. I would honor my father in my own way, with dignity and love. I would take my place as his son, not seeking approval or acceptance from my siblings, but acknowledging the truth of who we had been to each other. As I finally drifted toward sleep, I thought I could almost hear my father's voice, gruff but kind. "Show them who you really are, son. Stand your ground." And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly how to do that. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect early autumn day my father would have appreciated. I woke early, too restless to sleep, and spent the quiet hours before sunrise writing a letter of my own, not to my siblings, but to my father. Words I needed to say, a private goodbye that no one could take from me. I dressed carefully in my suit, made sure the letter to my father was secure in my breast pocket, right next to his letter to me. Then I walked down to the hotel parking lot where I'd left the Mustang overnight. In the early morning light, the car gleamed like a drop of blood against the gray asphalt. I ran my hand along its perfect finish, took a deep breath of the cool morning air, and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was butter-soft against my back, the steering wheel solid under my palms. I started the engine, and the powerful rumble seemed to sync with my heartbeat. This was it. No turning back now. I drove slowly through the awakening town, past familiar landmarks, childhood memories flickering like an old film reel in my mind. The plan was simple. I wouldn't force my way into the chapel where I wasn't wanted. I wouldn't create a scene or embarrass anyone, but I would be at the cemetery. I would say my goodbye at my father's final resting place, arriving in the car he had lovingly restored and deliberately left to me. As I approached Pinecrest Chapel, I could see cars already filling the parking lot. The funeral was scheduled for 11 a.m., and it was just past 10:30. My greatest wish is that you find your way back to being a family again, supporting each other as siblings should. I sat in the Mustang, reading those words over and over, feeling my father's presence as strongly as if he were sitting beside me. He hadn't just been thinking about fairness or justice when he changed his will. He had been thinking about reconciliation, about creating a situation where we would have to talk to each other, work together, find some way forward as a family. It was manipulative in its way, forcing a connection none of us might have chosen on our own. But it was also an act of hope, a father's last attempt to mend what was broken in his family. As I put the phone down and started the engine again, I found myself smiling despite the complications ahead. My father, the master builder, was still trying to repair things, even from beyond the grave. The next day, as I crossed into Nebraska, the vastness of the Great Plains stretching around me like an ocean of grass, my phone rang again. This time it was Diana. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Diana. Jordan." Her voice was cool, controlled, but I could hear the tension underneath. "We need to talk about the will." "I've seen it," I said, keeping my own voice neutral. "Mr. Abernathy sent me a copy." "Then you know this can't stand," she said. "It's completely unfair to Michael. He's the one who stayed, who helped Dad with the business, who was there every day. And now he has to share the house with you? Someone who visited maybe once a year?" I bit back my initial angry response, reminding myself of my father's wish for reconciliation. "It's what Dad wanted." "Diana, he was clear about that." "He wasn't thinking clearly," she insisted. "You show up after years of minimal contact, suddenly you're talking weakly, and he changes his will. It looks suspicious, Jordan. Very suspicious." The implication stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Are you accusing me of manipulating our dying father for his money?" "I'm saying it looks that way," she hedged. "And a judge might agree." I pulled the Mustang over to the shoulder of the highway, putting the car in park so I could focus on this conversation. "Let me be very clear, Diana. I didn't know Dad had changed his will. I didn't ask him for anything. I just wanted to make peace with my father before he was gone." "Convenient timing," she said, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Now, did you read his letter?" I asked. "The personal note in the will about wanting us to be a family again?" "That's just words," she dismissed. "People say all kinds of things at the end." "What about your letter?" I pressed. "Did he leave you one too?" A pause. "Yes," she admitted reluctantly, "but that's private." "So is mine," I said. "But I'm willing to share it with you and Michael if it would help you understand why Dad made the decisions he did." Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its hard edge. "Why are you being so reasonable about this? If you're so innocent, why aren't you angry that we excluded you from the funeral?" It was a fair question, one I had been asking myself throughout this long drive home. "I am angry," I admitted. "I'm hurt and disappointed, and yes, angry. But I'm also tired, Deanna. Tired of the fighting. Tired of being the family villain. Tired of carrying around this weight of rejection. Dad wanted better for us. Maybe it's time we tried to want that too." She didn't respond immediately, and I could almost see her sitting in her immaculate living room, struggling with emotions she preferred to keep tightly controlled. "I'm not contesting the will," I added softly. "Whatever you and Michael decide to do about the house and the rest, I'll work with you. But I won't be shut out again. Not this time." "I need to think," she said finally. "This isn't just about money or property. It's about everything." "I know," I agreed. "Take your time. I'm still driving back to Portland. We don't have to figure it all out today." After we hung up, I sat on the shoulder of the highway for a few minutes, watching. The occasional car zoom past, feeling strangely lightened. It wasn't resolution, not by a long shot, but it was conversation. Real conversation, not just accusations and defenses. It was a start. I pulled back onto the highway, the Mustang's engine eager and responsive, as if approving of this small step toward healing. The vast Nebraska sky stretched above me, endless and open, full of possibility. That evening, I stopped at a small motel in western Nebraska, too tired to push on to Wyoming. After a shower and a mediocre dinner from the diner next door, I sat on the bed and finally allowed myself to open the email Mr. Abernathy had sent with my father's letter, the full, Unabridged version, not just the note that had accompanied. The keys to the Mustang. My son, it began, and those two simple words brought tears to my eyes. By the time you read this, I'll be gone, and there will be so much left unsaid between us. That's my fault, not yours. I was never good with words or feelings. Your mother was the one who handled all that. After she died, I retreated into myself, into my work, into the familiar pattern of relying on Diana to manage the family and Michael to follow in my footsteps. You were always different, more like your mother, questioning everything, seeing the world through an artist's eyes, needing more than our small town could offer. I didn't know how to connect with that part of you. It frightened me, if I'm being honest. So I pushed you away, criticized the very qualities that made you special, tried to force you into a mold that was never meant for you. When you left, I told myself it was your choice, your rejection of us. It took me years to realize it was the opposite. We had rejected you in 100 small ways, long before you packed your bags. The past year, getting to know you again as an adult, has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. Seeing the man you've become, the success you've built on your own terms, the integrity and creativity that are so essentially you, I'm prouder than I can say, and ashamed that it took me so long to see what was always there. I've changed my will to reflect what I should have acknowledged long ago, that you are every bit as much my child, my legacy, as your siblings. This isn't about material things. It's about recognition, about belonging, about your rightful place in this family. Diana and Michael won't understand at first. They've built their identities around a story that casts you as the deserter, the one who abandoned family duty. It's easier than facing their own roles and pushing you away. Be patient with them if you can. They're also grieving, also trying to make sense of a changing world without me in it. The Mustang is yours because you understood why it mattered to me. Not just a car, but a testament to patience, to vision, to the belief that broken things can be made beautiful again with enough care and dedication. Like our relationship, like perhaps our family. I leave you with one request. Don't give up on your siblings, not yet. They're stubborn and set in their ways like their father, but they're also capable of growth and change, with time, with patience, with forgiveness. I love you, son. I should have said it more often. I should have shown it more clearly. I hope you can forgive an old man who learned too late how to be the father you deserved. Dad, I sat on the motel bed, letter in hand, tears streaming down my face, feeling the weight of his words, the regret, the love, the hope. He hadn't just been making amends for his own peace of mind. He had been trying, in his last months, to lay the groundwork for healing that would continue after he was gone. The Mustang wasn't just a car. The will wasn't just about money or property. They were tools, carefully chosen and deliberately employed by a man who had spent his life building things, fixing things, making things work. His final project, the family he was leaving behind. I picked up my phone and, on impulse, texted both Michael and Diana the same message. I'm willing to try if you are. For Dad. Then I set the phone aside, not expecting immediate responses, and went to the window to look out at the Mustang, gleaming under the motel's security lights. The perfect lines of its design, the deep red paint that looked almost black in the dim light, the chrome details catching and reflecting even the faintest illumination. It was a work of art as much as a machine. My father had poured thousands of hours into its restoration, carefully disassembling, cleaning, replacing, rebuilding, until something broken and abandoned had become something beautiful and valuable again. It had been an act of faith as much as skill faith, that the rust and decay weren't the final word, that beneath the damage was something worth saving. As I stood there, my phone buzzed on the bed behind me. I turned to see a text from Michael. I read Dad's letter to me. We should talk when you get back. Simple words, but they felt like a door cracking open, letting in a thin ray of light. Minutes later, another buzz. "Diana, this time. This won't be easy, but I'm willing to try." I smiled through my tears, looking back at the Mustang, feeling my father's presence as strongly as if he were standing beside me. "Well played, Dad," I whispered. "Well played." The next morning, I hit the road early, eager to cover the remaining distance to Portland. As I drove through Wyoming and at Idaho, I found myself reflecting on the journey, not just the physical miles I was covering, but the emotional territory I had traversed since receiving that first text from Marcus about the funeral. I had set out seeking closure, a chance to say goodbye to my father on my own terms. I hadn't expected reconciliation with my siblings, hadn't